Hey, I'm Brian Stelter, and it's time for Reliable Sources. This is our weekly look at the story behind the story of how the media really works and how the news gets made. This weekend, big news, all courtesy of Twitter. You know, Twitter really reveals the real President Trump. His tweets reveal his real disdain for the press. 280 characters at a time. He's promoting his friends, the media outlets that tell him how great he is, while at the same time trying to punish media outlets that fact-check him, that report the news, and challenge him. Consider the timing of the U.S. president's latest anti-CNN tweet last night. On the same day, the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, signed this into law.
Russia is responding to Washington's requirements that Russian broadcaster RT register as a foreign agent. Russia's Sputnik news service reports that President Vladimir Putin has signed a law allowing authorities there to list foreign media outlets as foreign agents.
Okay, so what's going on here? That's the report from CNN International. Basically, this law in Russia is the precursor to regulating news outlets that are based in other countries. So what that means is that the U.S. government-funded outlets like Voice of America will probably have to register in Russia as foreign agents, the same way Russia Today had to register that way in Washington. Now, outlets like CNN that are not government-funded but are based in the U.S. are also likely to be targeted by Russia. Within a few hours of that decision by the Russian president, U.S. President Trump singled out CNN as fake news. Quote, Fox News is so much more important in the United States than CNN. But outside of the U.S., CNN International is still a major source of, parentheses, fake news. And they represent our nation to the world very poorly. The outside world does not see the truth from them. CNN responded, it's not CNN's job to represent the U.S. to the world. That's your job. Our job is to report the news. Hashtag facts first. Now, some observers said they felt this was Trump's way of telling Putin, make sure you crack down on CNN International. Or maybe it was just a complete coincidence. But either way, Trump's tweet reads like an invitation to undemocratic regimes around the world to harass CNN journalists with the blessing of the U.S. president. Is this presidential? No. Is it petty? Definitely. And speaking of petty, let's talk about the president's other tweet this weekend about Time magazine. This is something involving Time's Person of the Year choice. Of course, that's coming up in about 10 days. The magazine has to consider who should be on the cover. It's logical that Trump would be one of the contenders, but he tweeted that he does not want to be considered because he won't give an interview. You can see the tweet here. He said, Time magazine called to say I was probably going to be named Man Person of the Year, like last year, but I would have to agree to an interview and a major photo shoot. I said probably is no good, and I took a pass. Thanks anyway. I'll tell you why I thought that tweet was so interesting, right? It reveals something about the president's psychology, but it also speaks to his lack of interviews with any outlets not named Fox News. You know, for more than 6 months now, President Trump's been avoiding major television networks like CNN, NBC, ABC, CBS, and only speaking to his friends, really the pro-Trump hosts on Fox News. Let me show you a graphic we put together to really document this. You'll see his interviews since Robert Mueller was appointed special counsel. 9 with Fox News, 1 with the CBN, which is a Christian broadcasting network, 1 with another Christian broadcasting network, and 1 with Sinclair, and then none for any of the major U.S. television networks. The last time President Trump spoke with Time magazine was also back in May, right before Mueller was appointed. So I wonder if his rejection of the Person of the Year prize or award or honor, whatever it is actually just a way to avoid a real news interview. Now let's talk about the president's latest tweets and more with an expert panel. Olivia Nuzzi, Washington correspondent for New York Magazine. Also here in New York, Don Avlon, a CNN analyst and editor-in-chief of the Daily Beast. Joanne Lippman, the editor-in-chief for USA Today and the chief content officer for Gannett. And in Washington, David Zurwick, the media critic for the Baltimore Sun. Olivia, it seems to me every so often we have one of these flashpoints where President Trump's disdain for the press really comes to life on Twitter. Do you think it's because he's vacationing down in Florida that the real Trump is coming out?
Well, I think for the last couple of weeks we've seen sort of a throwback in his tone, almost to 2013 style Trump tweets. He really does seem to kind of be tweeting what he thinks and what he feels in the moment and not thinking too hard about what the effects might be in a way that we saw. I mean, his tweets have always been pretty insane for a politician or for
Insane?
Yes, certainly. But I think during the campaign and certainly in the early days of the administration, throughout the transition before that, he was toned down a little bit. And in the last couple of weeks, we've really seen him return to the style that he became known for on Twitter in 2012, 2013.
Yeah, this is YOLO Trump, and we've known for a long time.
YOLO Trump, okay.
That, Twitter Trump is the real Trump. Teleprompter Trump sounds presidential, but is unrelated to the instincts and the impulses and the thoughts of the real man. What I think it really drills down on is two things. First of all, the idea that the office would ennoble itself, the idea that he would become more presidential by virtue of the responsibilities, that should be self-evidently, regarded as not the case in the case of this president. And that's actually fairly unique. Most presidents do grow into the office. He's rejected that mantle of responsibility. And I think the second thing is we shouldn't normalize the spectacle, because it is a serious, constant attack at our democratic norms, going after the press, going after individual entities, the geopolitics of Russia's move almost aside, the lack of transparency, the resistance to accountability, simply sitting down for an interview. None of that is normal in the context of American politics, let alone presidential politics, and we should not be suckered into treating it as such.
None of it is normal, and yet I looked at President Trump's tweets from a year ago this weekend, and he was also bashing CNN. In some ways, nothing has changed, to your all's point about it hasn't changed in office. And I wonder, John, if it's a challenge for your writers and editors how to keep going back to these same stories and making them feel fresh.
Well, I think you need to separate out, the style and the substance. If it's simply a stylistic tweet, sometimes you can chase that because it's a fun story about narrative. If it's about something deeper, like attacks on the free press in the context of Russia, signing a new legislation to crack down potentially on foreign entities, that's serious. So I think that the issue is you got to focus on the substance and not get distracted by things that are simply style. That's a challenge for all of us, just like it's a challenge to remain invigorated by the challenges of covering this administration and not exhausted by it.
Well, let's get a read from David Zurwick on that tweet about CNN International. David, I'm a CNNer, you're not. What was your interpretation objectively of his slam against CNNI?
Yeah, I was, Brian, I'm so glad you constructed that the way you did at the top. I think CNN International is one of the great journalistic institutions in the world, and it's one of the few, because CNN has spent the money to have a real infrastructure with bureaus and with reporters and with photographers at a time when so many other organizations, good organizations, had to cut back or felt they had to cut back and close bureaus. This is a lifeline to us into the world. This is a global lifeline. When there are massive human rights violations or a disaster, CNN International is the one source of information we can rely on to connect with that. And this is another way that Trump recklessly hurts us in the world. We need a supply of reliable information, global information, and nobody comes close to doing what CNN did. And God bless them for all the years when everybody else was cutting back and they were spending money to keep these bureaus open. And they do great, courageous coverage. I mean, the foreign correspondents for CNN who stand on a battlefield, I mean, my God, you see them getting hit in the head with those rubber bullets they shoot on their helmet. They're standing there reporting these stories to us. And this guy wants to mock them. This guy who never served in the military, never got near a battlefield, wants to mock CNN. He doesn't understand what he's doing when he tells autocratic fascist regimes to crack down on CNN International. He does not have a sense. It's like a 12-year-old schoolboy talking crap in the schoolyard, and it's really a disgrace to us.
Well, the danger really comes because we know that journalists abroad are under actual physical danger, unlike in the United States. And so to suggest that the Kremlin should be perhaps cracking down on American journalists could be potentially extremely dangerous.
That's the broader context for when you see the president tweeting about any news out, especially international coverage.
Sure, and to David's point, I think it's letting Trump off the hook to say that he doesn't know what he's doing here, or that he's not, well informed enough to understand the risks of saying something like that. I mean, he is putting the American press in danger all over the world. And I think to say, oh, well, he's just not educated enough to realize that is to let him off the hook. And I think we should hold him to a higher standard than that.
Now, the other piece of this, Time Magazine, let's put on screen Time Magazine's response to the president's tweet saying the president's incorrect about how we choose Person of the Year. Time does not comment on our choice until December 6th, publication day. Jonathan, I assume what happened here is someone from Time called up Hope Hicks and said, you know what time of year it is? It's Person of the Year time. Obviously, your boss is going to be a contender. Is he available for an interview? But maybe they wouldn't commit to actually putting him on the cover, and thus he got ticked off.
Right, which would be totally normal. I mean, you've got people who are in that sort of upper echelon of essays for, Person of the Year. The standard always is the person who's had the biggest impact on the news, not good, bad, or indifferent. And that's a standard procedure. They're going to call a handful of folks and set it up and then do the big reveal. But Donald Trump, obviously, not only taking a shot at Time, but saying, look, if you don't guarantee me, the winner, I'm not going to participate. Obviously, the real motivation, though, you got to assume is not wanting to sit down for an interview with a news outlet that doesn't simply offer a partisan reinforcing foot massage.
Yeah, I noticed over the summer he answered questions from Time, but only via email. That was his way of avoiding a real interview. And like I said, 6 months now without those interviews.
But let's be clear, though. So Time does not require an interview to be the Person of the Year.
2 years ago, Angela Merkel was the Time Person of the Year.
Angela Merkel was the Person of the Year without an interview. So was Hitler. Right, so the Person of the Year could be for good or for ill, but they don't require an interview. They don't tell the person in advance, and they ask for lots of people for interviews. That issue is full of interviews of other influential people who they request interviews from.
So I suppose it's the end of the year. I have to wonder, David Zerwick, if the president's going to continue this no real interview strategy. I mean, the Super Bowl's in 2 months. President Obama always gave an interview, a Super Bowl Sunday. I wonder if all those sorts of traditions are out the window because President Trump does not want to have to address questions about Russia.
He's thrown so many traditions out the window, and John's absolutely right. We should not normalize it when he does this kind of thing. We should keep screaming bloody murder about it. It's wrong. But Brian, I think in terms of these interviews, I went back and looked at that interview in June of 2016 that Jake Tapper did about when Trump wanted the judge taken off the case on Trump University. And he said it was because of his heritage. He was Mexican. And Jake Tapper said, if you're saying this man cannot do his job because of his race, is that not the very definition of racism? I don't think Trump wants to sit down with a real journalist like Jake Tapper and be exposed again that way. It's much easier to be with his Twitter pals over at Fox and Friends and with Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham and all the people who play this game with him. And I'll tell you what,
they're going to say they're not Twitter pals. They hold him accountable from the right. That's what Laura Ingraham would probably say.
Yeah, if you've seen her show, she's not done a very good job of holding him accountable lately from the right. I've been watching.
All right. Well, even Brett Baier at Fox has said he's trying to get an interview with Trump. Journalists at Fox have been unable to. John, last word?
That's a really important point, is that, the journalists, Brett Baier and Shep Smith, those folks have not been able to get the interviews, but the opinion side of that network is the one that's getting all the access to the president because it is about sort of mutual circulation of talking points, not real questions or holding power to account.
Everybody, stick around. Much more right after a quick break here, including something we've come up with, trying to talk about the difference between truth and a lie, the sometimes subtle, sometimes not so subtle way President Trump blurs the line. Right after this.